It wouldn't be another episode without you starting with like not laughing or dancing or you don't do the chair swivel.
The only option.
I'll do it for you. Swivel in the chair.
My chair doesn't swivel anymore.
I
I
know,
got a
that's what I was just saying
stationary one.
because I picked on you enough. What can I pick on next?
No,
Welcome everybody to the next
there's endless
episode
options.
of the Mind and Body podcast. This episode is about getting started again. And this could have multiple meanings actually, because we're just starting again with our podcast after the first of the
Uh,
year. Crazy
yeah,
end of 2024. It was like a battle to the
yeah.
end. But we're here in 2025. That means we survived. And here we are. You're like, are we though? Are we really here?
Well, I, I love the fact that you were like, we survived. And I was just like, barely, or at
Yeah,
least me.
you like paused and you had like this existential crisis at that moment. Like, wait,
Yo,
what
in
is
our notes, you used the word existential, and I literally, my brain went there. I was just like, existential crisis.
Yes, yes. We have
I
to
did.
clean this up. I have to like, I don't know, it's the philosopher or amateur philosopher in me that's like, let's think deeply about this, I don't know. Here's a
No,
quote,
no, no, it was a great word.
not from a philosopher, but from a famous tennis player named Arthur Ashe. Do you know his name? He gave
No.
this like little try statement that I like. He says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you
Mm.
can. And so when people would ask him, like in any situation, like, man, how do I deal with this? He would use this try statement. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And I
Yeah.
think it's a great place to start. But I think what we're gonna do in this episode is really flesh out, man, I've had some huge setbacks. What do I do? Well, let's start where you are. Let's use what you already have. And a lot of
Mm.
times you're going to talk about this, Amber. A lot of times we can tend to focus on what we can't control rather than what we can.
Oh,
And
yeah.
also do what you can right now. Like what are some steps that you can take? Because oftentimes people get so overwhelmed, they do nothing, and that actually makes them even more discouraged and depressed in the long term because they just need to start. And
Yeah.
we're going to try to give you some things to help you reframe, to encourage you, to help you get back up, and just give you a kind of a how-to process to do that as well. So hopefully this will be encouraging to you. I was
Yeah.
reading, and I actually forget who it was. I was trying to pinpoint this, but there was a book that I was reading on courage, basically, and it says courage is the power to let go of the familiar. And I'm like, ooh,
Ooh.
that's a
Oh,
really cool idea because obviously courage can be other things too, but I know for me, sometimes I can be courageous in things I already know, but man, if I
right.
start over in a different way, it's the unfamiliar to say, hey, I'm willing to let go of the familiar and move forward. Dang, that's courage.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting that you bring that up because I was just talking with my therapist um, recently and chatting about how you can go through different portions of life with different levels of like that courage, right? And we were comparing a situation I was in life like about 9 years ago versus things I'm going through right now. And I told her, I said, my mindset is completely different. And like time will do that to you and maturity will do that to you. But actually, my courage was higher years ago than it is right now. And I told her, I was like, I'm sitting in this situation, and I'll go into details shortly. I said, I'm sitting in this, where I'm at in life right now. And, you know, there was one point that Amber, I talk about like my past self. I said there was one point that Amber used to look at situations like what I'm in right now, and I would be problem solving away. I would just be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm going to do. Come up with solutions. We're going to move forward. I'm going to, get, these ducks in a row, and I'm going to, stop talking with these people because they're not good for me. And I'm going to go for that job and just like, boom, problem solving, forging ahead. And I said, and like now I'm in a completely different mindset, and the courage is not there. Like I'm sitting, uh, feeling like I cannot move forward.
Mm,
And so we started dissecting that. And so I think it's great that you were talking about like the courage to forge ahead. Um, but like, how do you develop the courage to forge ahead when you don't have it, Jon?
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's such a good question. And the thing is, and you and I are similar in this way, but when you have a solution oriented mindset, where you're like, okay, here's problem A. Okay. How am I going to figure out the problems? Well, here's the possible solutions. This seems to be the best one. All right, let's go with solution B. Seems to be the best go, so let's go at it. And if it
Mm-hmm.
fails, then a solution oriented person says, "Oh, okay. Well, let's consider our options again. Let's come up with that solution." But when you have several goes at that, you're like, problem. I'm going to find a solution. I'm going to execute that solution or plan, and it fails. What begins to diminish is actually your courage, because you're
Yeah.
like, I've tried to
Yeah.
solve this problem and I failed repeatedly. So it makes you reluctant. It makes
Yeah.
you less inclined to say, hey, I'm going to do it this time. And also, like, you can only do so many kinds of affirmations in the mirror. After
Yeah.
you've just like faced this and failed, faced this and failed, you're just like, and sometimes you almost feel better instead of saying, you're beautiful and amazing. You almost want to look at the mirror just like, yeah, you do suck. you know? Have you ever,
Yeah.
like, can you relate with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And 100%. Also, flip side of the same coin, um, trying and failing, you can also be going through life events that are entirely out of your control, and they seem to just come one right after the other. Like when it rains, it pours in
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
Either way, like it can be extraordinarily discouraging, disheartening, and completely chip away at any sort of confidence or power you felt or thought you had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
actually, one thing that's helped me with, we're going to get into like this a couple of steps here in a second, but one thing that's really helped me when I've looked at people who have had the breakthrough,
Yeah.
and like I'm going to put this in a business context for a moment, but like most really successful business owners, and I'm probably going to get the average wrong. So any of you that's like researching this know that I'm kind of going off of several things that I've read, but it's between like somewhere between like 9 and 11 uh, businesses attempts, like starting a business and failing before they got to the one that was successful.
Mm.
And I think I read somebody that said like, "Hey, this is my fifth business. Like I failed 4 of them, and I finally was successful in the fifth one." It is
Yeah.
extremely rare for someone to just have an idea and then just take off. It's just like uh,
Yeah.
it's very a rare thing. And if it is, it's like maybe they've already had success in other areas, so now they go start this new thing, and they already have the capital, the connections, the networking, and all of that's in place. So that when they start something new, it moves. But if you're starting at the
Right.
bottom, it can be really difficult. But one thing that is encouraging to me is when I heard someone who's very successful actually say, "Oh, I had to spend a long time sucking before I was good." And
Yeah.
it was like, "Oh, hey." Um, but it kind of gave me, it helped reframe sucking, because it wasn't like, "Oh, there's people who suck and then there's people who succeed." It's like, no.
No.
Everyone starts off here in
The people who succeed got past the fact that it sucked.
yeah. This is going to be
Yeah.
the highest episode of the word suck. Here we go. Just kidding. I've already used it a lot. But so the
Yeah.
first couple of things that we have written down, if you're just like, man, I've been in Suckville for a while, you like that one? That's a new word. It's
No.
gonna take off.
Don't ever use that
It's
again.
gonna take off. Oh, that's great. If for those who are listening in, I think Amber I was a 10 years, 11 years gap difference
Oh, yeah, yeah.
in there.
I think we're 10 years apart.
10 years
Mm-hmm.
apart. Okay. So Amber
Yep.
keeps me like, she tells me, she's like, yeah, that don't do that. She keeps me kind of grounded. What do you think?
I try.
You
I
try.
try.
Oh man. Amber's,
He has a mind of his own, first of all.
well, that's fair. And I plan to keep it that way. It's just kind of fun. Keeps life exciting.
Yes,
So,
it does.
for those listening in, you're like, okay, get to these points. I'm tired of being in this.
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of things I think will help you that we use actually too in helping clients when they get stuck when it comes to like health and fitness. But this could be applied to not just health and fitness. It can really apply to just general mindset as well. And the first thing is it's good to just sit with the setback and acknowledge that it happened. Like sometimes
Yeah.
you
Or
can live,
acknowledge that it's there, like that you're in it.
yeah, and sometimes
Yeah.
you can live in this place of denial where you're just kind of running from reality. We are very good at deceiving ourselves. We're just really good at
Yeah.
like telling ourselves a story, but after a while when it compounds, eventually we get hit with the weight of that reality and it feels like it's crushing. But it's actually good for us to acknowledge like, you know what? This is definitely a setback. This is hard. But looking
Yeah.
at that event or setback really without judgment. Now, I'm not saying that you don't ever acknowledge or take responsibility for any type of failure on your part, but man, there's a huge difference when you get in a place where you're just kind of like constantly beating yourself up. You actually create a mental barrier to restart. Like if I'm
Yeah.
in the mode of beating myself up, I'm not in the mode to actually move towards um, reframing and rebuilding and restarting. I'm
Correct.
just in tear down mode. But I do think it's
Yeah.
helpful to say this is clearly a setback. This is hard, and allow yourself to feel those feelings.
Yeah.
But
I was talking with a friend about this the other day, because she was kind of in this like tear down mode mindset. And I was like, okay, I was like, put your best friend across from you, having a face to face conversation. Would you be telling her any of this? And she was like, no. I said, okay, cool. Now put yourself across from you. Like
yes,
having that um shift of mindset, being like, I would never talk to somebody else the way I talk to myself.
yeah,
Boom. Okay. If that's the case, then there needs to be a shift in your mentality about yourself. And what is that telling you about your relationship with yourself? Um, you know, that's a good example. And like even in my own life, so I've had a lot of changes in the past couple of years. I went through divorce, I went through career shift, job change, I moved 3 times. Um, like all of this very life altering decisions and making me very unsteady on my own 2 feet. And I have had to deal with that exact thing of facing myself in the mirror. And I realized my relationship with myself was so damaged
mm,
that I was in this, not good mentality space. And, therapy has been so wonderfully helpful. Um, and acknowledging the setback, acknowledging, the life event that you don't have control over, acknowledging the change, and accepting it without judgment is so incredibly crucial with yourself. My therapist literally told me last night, she was like, in this place that feels empty, when you are by yourself and you feel empty, you don't got any solutions, you got all the problems and no solutions, and you just feel broken and uh like there is no way out. Sit there, acknowledge it, because it is speaking to you for a reason. And usually that reason is it is a time of self-reflection.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
I like that, and it feels unhurried because like
Yep.
when you're a problem solver, it can be problem.
Yes.
Oh, what's the solutions? Oh, here it is. Okay, execute, move, and
Yep.
it's not necessarily a bad thing. It actually can be a good quality, but
That is usually me.
yeah, yeah, no, me too. And
Mm-hmm.
you can have that crisis almost of like, oh my goodness, I don't have anything on the table.
Yep.
I got to come up with an answer. And it's actually good to kind of say, I'm just going to sit here, take a little bit longer to self reflect because evidently what I have been doing has been kind of a band aid approach, and
Yep.
I need to slow down and do some self-reflection. I think that's really good, because you might even be doing what you're doing not because it aligns with who you are and your values. You actually might be doing what you're doing because you're still trying to please everyone around you, and
Mm-hmm.
and that might be the reason why it's not working. I mean, there
Yeah.
could be.
Or you're trying to save face.
Yeah,
Call
yeah,
that one out.
exactly.
If
Which
you were trying to save face.
reminds me
Mm-hmm.
of we were talking about the existential crisis. There was this French philosopher. His name is Paul Jean. I think it's pronounced Sartre. I think is how you say the last name.
Okay.
I've been reading through his work. He's a really neat guy. Like, he was one of like the main existential philosophers, like really developing this idea. And he makes his quote, and I really like it. He says, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." In other words,
Mm.
people say, "I want to be free from these external things that are happening to me. If I could just get rid of these external things, I would be free." But the truth is that for our whole life, we just can't control the things that are happening to us. At least
Yeah.
not altogether. Sometimes you can. You can get to a different environment and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of things we can't control. And he says, hey, if you can, freedom is actually how you respond to those things.
Yeah.
But you can also respond to them poorly, and they actually become bondage. So, and
Yeah.
this is a reminds me of a Marcus Aurelius quote, and you kind of have to let it sit. And he says, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimation of it." And
Ah, yes.
you have, and it says, and this you have. Actually, I think I might have wrote down the last part of the quote wrong, but he says, but and at any moment you have the power to revoke that type of thinking. So let me
Yeah.
rephrase the quote that I know I have right. He says, "You are distressed by anything external. The pain is not due to the thing itself, but your estimation of it." So another way of phrasing it is like we actually are tortured more in our imagination than in the
Yep.
actual reality of the things, just the way we're processing it. And so the ability to feel those feelings, but then reframe them, not like tell yourself a lie, but like, for instance, let me give a case in point. Let's say that, like in health and fitness, let's say that you fell off the track, stop training,
Mm-hmm.
stop eating right, you gained 15 pounds, and you're like, is this really me? Did I really get here? And you just feel like you feel bad, your mental state feels poor, and you're like, I just don't know if I really want to restart this. I just feel like a loser. Um, and if you tell yourself, I am such a loser, what you're doing at that moment is you're looking at this problem. It's a real problem, but you're telling yourself a story. And the
Right.
story is, I'm a loser in the story. Or you could reframe it and say, I did fall off, but I'm going to allow this fall off to help myself rebuild even better. I'm really going to rebuild. Now, you may not know the strategy for that yet, but now I know this is a little bit oversimplistic, but hear me out. One person says that one story is, I'm a loser. How could I ever do this? Well, that's going to be hard to restart from. If I tell
Yeah.
myself, I did make some poor choices, I fell off, but man, I'm going to control the path forward, and it's going to be interesting to see. I have a greater awareness of myself now, and I'm going to rebuild. Now you've reframed the story, which is now going to give you power to move forward in a way that will actually bring momentum and productivity as opposed to being derailed. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah. I mean, reframing, using where you're at as fuel to get you to a better place. Like, you know, if we're talking, weight gain or something like that. Um, or we're talking about maybe financial status. You've lowered yourself so much financially, or you've been through a lot of stuff that put you in a lower financial, and it's really uncomfortable, and you really I never want to be here again. Use that as fuel. Using that feeling of like, I don't like where my body is at. I never want to be here again. and switching your mindset from, beating yourself up to, okay, I no longer want to be this. I never want to feel this way again. I no longer want to be here ever again. And going, okay, what is my strategy for getting out of this? And then once you get out of it, okay, what's my strategy for staying out of it and never being back at that position again, never being that vulnerable financially again, never being at that weight again, and holding yourself to a higher standard as a human. That's a form of growth right there, instead of beating yourself up.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally with you. I think that's good. And like another kind of reframing, I was thinking about this when you were talking about even like financial business.
Yeah.
Like if you look at like, oh, this is really relevant to me because I'm a business owner, and there's times where I've struggled at being a business owner. There's times where I feel like, oh man, I'm failing. But when I look at successful people who says, oh yeah, I failed many times. It took me this many goes around to get better. Their story actually impacted my story. This is why it's so important, as we'll get to later, to surround yourself with people that have a growth mindset as opposed to always leaning towards that negative bias.
Yeah.
But when I heard like, oh, there's so many people that actually have been on this journey that have failed many times, and the ingredient was they persevered to the success. I was going to use this quote later, but I'll go ahead and throw this out. I think it was Alex Hormozy, but I'm not positive. He says, somebody said, I succeeded because I have failed more times than you have attempted.
Ooh.
And I really
Oh.
love that quote. I mean, it sounds kind of snarky depending on the context.
No. Like that. I mean, maybe a little snarky, but it should be like a good challenging.
Yeah.
Like that's challenging.
It's like I've been willing to fail more, and this is the difference. And I'll even just throw this point in. The order doesn't really matter, but you hear people say often, like, it's not about perfection; it's about progress. Well,
Yeah.
all or nothing type of person that says, I'm either going to do this like flying colors, I'm going to do this perfectly, or I'm just not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
You have the makeup of being someone who's going to fail at life. Like,
More than likely.
yes, because
All or nothing mentality does not succeed very often.
yeah, and even if you do succeed, can you maintain it with that mindset? You're going to have to grow out of that mindset
Yeah.
because
That's a good point.
If you have that mindset, then when you fail, it'll be such a devastating blow to you. But if you're like, oh, failure is actually just a part of the process. You cannot be successful without the ingredient of failure. It's like, think about a cake missing a piece of the ingredients, and it's like something's wrong with this. The same thing is true for success.
Yeah.
You don't have failure. You don't have all the actual components of what true success is going to look like, especially long term. Like, I'm not saying that you can't try something and to be successful in itself, but just in life, pursuing life, you just have to expect this is a part of the process to my success. It comes down to nutrition, training, life, relationships, business, finances. I mean, whatever bucket you want to put it in, all of this would be extremely like important for that. So
Yeah.
first point, acknowledge the setbacks even without judgment. We talked about, I'll just glaze over this point, and if you want to add something to it, you can, Amber, but like focus on progress, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything you want to add to that?
No.
And number 3 that we want to talk about is reconnect with your why. Now, this is just like getting at a couple questions like, why does this matter to me? Like I actually asked a client the other day who was really struggling with adhering to the nutrition and training, like missed a whole week. And the second week was like one workout and training. And I was just like, hey, how important is this to you right now? It's like, you got a lot of things going on. And I wasn't trying to judge the person. I was just like, how important is this to you? And what was interesting, the question actually put them back into a frame of mind that says, I do want this. Yeah, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Like, I've been lax, and I needed to reconnect with my why. I needed to reconnect with why I'm doing this in the first place. Like, what kind of a person do I want to become? Another way to flip this is to say, what's the alternative? Like, if I actually don't become this,
Ooh,
what's the alternative? And
love that.
normally, um, the pain of staying where I'm at actually outweighs the pain of growth, and
Yeah.
I move towards change. But if I don't confront myself with the pain of staying where I'm at, I might just be like, well, I'm scared of growth. But if I look at the pain of staying where I'm at, I'm like, actually, I'd rather face the fear of growth than stay here. And but that when you reconnect with your why, these are the
Yeah.
type of questions that you asked.
Yeah. I like that. That's very solid. Um, I like that. Anchoring, I see one of the things we discussed before, anchoring yourself in long-term goals rather than fleeting frustrations. And I want to speak to that for a second, because we can be in situations where fleeting frustrations do not seem like they're fleeting. They seem like they're lasting forever. And I know you've been through things in life and even of recent, that took months to figure out and solve. I myself, I'm in the middle of figuring out like a new living situation that is taking me months to figure out. And we live in a society that searches for instant gratification. We look for those dopamine hits. We look for problems to be solved. We have microwaves to warm up our food quickly. We have Amazon to deliver packages quickly. We have convenience stores down the road, so it's the easiest thing to zip down to. And we live in all of these quick solutions. But the reality is true life situations often cannot be solved with the blink of an eye, or driving around the corner. And these fleeting frustrations can be overwhelming. And so reconnecting with your why while also looking at the fact that solutions and change are going to take time can be extraordinarily daunting. And this exactly is the reasoning behind your why, your vision, your goals, whatever you want to call it, is so incredibly crucial, because those things have to be strong enough to get you through the time that it's going to take to make those changes or find, those solutions, or sometimes having to sit back and, waiting to hear from the doctor, or waiting for an apartment to open up, or waiting for, a significant other, or waiting for a treatment. You could take that down any number of roads, of what a fleeting frustration could fall under. And all of which your why and your reason of getting through and what's on the other end. And you have the two options: you move forward or you go backwards. Because let me be very clear with you, anybody who's listening, staying still is not actually a thing. You are either moving forwards or you are moving backwards. Because if you are staying in the mentality of defeat, you are lowering yourself and you're pulling yourself back steadily.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I was thinking about this when you were talking. Like, I feel like we want to reach a level where it's just like, okay, finally I've matured and like I'm here. So now when life comes, I got it. But it's like every next level of your life will demand a different version of you. Like,
yes.
and that doesn't really end. So the moment
It doesn't end until you end.
when you have, you just gave me an existential crisis. No, it's good. But if you can, like, think of like this big epic story that's being told. Well, one, none of us would want to go and watch a movie that had no like event or drama or climax or uh, tension and overcoming that tension. Like we love those stories. Matter of fact, if I just was talking to a friend, and he's a philosopher friend of mine. He's like, if you could like live out like the Lord of the Rings story, and it was like victorious, and you were a part of it, wouldn't that be exciting? And maybe I not thinking of it long enough, but I was like, oh, dude, that would be cool. That'd be fun. That'd be like epic. But oftentimes in our life, we really kind of want this boring narrative of no problems, no conflicts, no struggle, no anything. But if we say,
Right, which is not life.
it's not really what we want, you know.
Yeah.
And I think if we can actually have clarity about like life is this big type of narrative story that I'm a part of. It's adventurous. It's difficult. Obviously, there's things in it that none of us like, you know, that can be hard. We want to overcome. But if we can go ahead and have the mindset like, okay, at every single level, there is going to be a growth class that I'm going to have to be in to allow myself to level up. Like, so, you know, like, let's put it this way, like when you graduate high school and you go to college, there's a different version of you that needs to develop to face the challenges there. It doesn't have to be, I say different version of you. We probably could just say an evolution of you, you know, like you're growing in your capacity and your skills. And instead of hitting every one of those new levels and going, oh man, this is so bad, I didn't expect it. Have the mindset to say, new level, new version of me. It's time for me to grow my capacity. That's a growth mindset.
I like that, growing capacity.
As opposed to a negative bias about everything. And matter of fact, this story plays out in so many ways. Sitting in traffic, somebody cuts me off. I can tell the story like, what a jerk. I hate that person. How dare they cut me off? See, if I do that all the time, I'm entertaining this negative bias. Or I could just be like, I can ignore the factor like, oh, oops, they didn't see me. Do you see how the other story didn't affect me as much? But if we're not careful, we tell ourselves stories about everything that's happening with a negative bias that sets us back really far. But if we can learn to be like, it's a part of the adventure, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to lie to yourself though. If something's bad, you could say it's bad. Like you talked about divorce. We're not saying reframe that as something not as bad as it is. It can be very difficult, you know. Nothing wrong with telling yourself the truth about things. But even with the truth, we can tell ourselves a narrative that's going to lead us into the adventure of life or lead us into a despair of life, you know. And that's really what we're getting at here. So a lot said there. And we probably could just keep talking about it. It's just such a good, really good point. I'm not going to review the points because I know I went out of order and I'll mess them up. So I'll just move.
Yeah, no, just next.
So next. That sounds funny.
Next.
So let's say like you're reconnecting with your why, but now you're like, okay, I want to do this. I want to get back on track. But my goodness, I'm overwhelmed. Like, I just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
I just feel like I got to lose all this weight again or whatever the case may be. How do you deal with being overwhelmed? And I think, Amber, maybe you could take this. I think it's good for us to learn the discipline of actually breaking down our overwhelm and creating, it's like, I want to think big, here's the goal, but let me start small. How would you do that? How would you suggest
that? So one of the things that I myself have been learning of late is you have to separate two things. You have to separate what are your controllables, like what can you actually control and change throughout the day, and then what is out of your control. So I want to speak to the out of control part first, because if you're anything like me, you want to be in control of everything around you, all the circumstances, your safety, your day in and day out things, you know, anything in your future. You want to be able to control and manipulate because it produces safety, right? This mental safety. If you know what's going to happen, nothing can come at you. And especially if you've been through a lot of things or you've been going through like a rough time or if you've fallen off track, you want to be able to control everything in order to get back on track, because that gives you a guarantee, right? But what you have to acknowledge is that most things in life, 90% of life, if I'm being entirely honest, is not within your control. Not only are things out of our control, such as the weather and nature, things out of our control, such as other people's feelings or what other people do around us. You know, somebody runs a red light and you get into an accident. It was nothing you did wrong. However, you can't control the fact that the other person decided to completely ignore it. You know, that's just one example. You know, your life can be completely dismantled by your partner. You know, that's something I've personally experienced. Your life can be completely uprooted when, you know, your job lets you go out of nowhere. All of these things are not within your control. And I think one of the biggest things you have to do is you have to acknowledge the things that are not within your control. You have to name them, and you have to let them go. You have to let it go. Because holding on and white knuckling something you have no control over is like, imagine getting onto a roller coaster and not buckling yourself in. You're white knuckling your entire way. We all know how that would end. So that's just an example. But then we can look at the other side and say, okay, what are my controllables? So your controllables are your daily habits, your day in and day out, you know, when you wake up, what you're eating, you know, do you have a job or are you looking for a job? You know, your meditation, your sleep, how much you're sleeping, when you're sleeping, do you have good habits before going to sleep so you get quality sleep? And then your mindset, your attitude about your controllables. Now, if you think about it, again, we have that 10% and then 90%. And
Yeah.
it's scary
Yes.
to think about, like, wow, I really don't have control over much.
Mhm.
And if you're somebody who hasn't had to experience, you know, the having to look at that 10%, just being, you know, at the rock bottom of life and being like, oh, wow, I really only have that 10% controllable. Like, some people will go through life and not have to really acknowledge that. And then some people, they have no choice but to acknowledge that. You know, I think about like, you and your wife and, you know, your one son who has, you know, medical issues. There's only so much control you have over that. That's just a part of life.
Yeah.
And
That was we had to
yeah,
move out of the state. Like we
yeah,
from one state to another, had problems with the medical situation, had to move again, and that was really the primary reason we moved, was that reason. So
yes. And it's stuff that's out of your control. And so you had to look at what were your controllables. Your controllable was, okay, I can find a place that's going to give us, you know, the medical assistance that we need, that are going to be able to provide for him. Like, you know, in my case in point right now, like there's a lot of uncontrollables with my living situation. And so I had to succumb to a temporary living situation where I'm at right now and just be like, okay, this is where I'm at. This was my option. I had two options. I had live in my car or, you know, move back in with my parents for a little bit. And that's okay. So when you only have control over a very, very small portion of what's happening around you in this huge, massive world, know that first of all, you're not the only one. All of us only have control over our tiny little portion of this earth, ourselves. And for some people, they would say the rest is left up to fate. For other people, they would say the rest is left up to God. Whatever you believe. But being able to rest in letting go of what you can't control is incredibly crucial to letting go of overwhelm.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're also you let go of the feeling of like I feel responsible to control everything. When you just like
Yeah.
let go of
Ooh.
like feeling like I'm responsible to control everything, it's
Uh-huh.
like for instance, even relationships when I feel like I'm not responsible how they respond to me telling them the truth. Now, obviously, you want to be responsible how you communicate it. Like you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that does show grace and so forth. But hey, I'm going to allow them to be an adult. I'm going to allow them to hear this, and these
Yeah.
are good. But I can't control the reaction, and I'm not going to feel responsible for how they react. They're an adult. I'm not going to worry about it. And
Ooh. You know what? And that's also, I don't know if it's difference in personality or if it's the difference between men and women. That I would say a very large portion of women, we take on uh, the responsibility of how other people feel and how other people take the things that we say. Like, oh, like if somebody were to take something I said incorrectly, I would not look at it and be like, well, that's not what I meant, and you need to get over it, or you need to figure it out. I would look back and I would be introspective and I would say, oh, could I have said that in a different way? Should I have said that, should I have worded it differently? Should I have said it in a different tone? And I'll go into like this huge analytical.
yeah, you'll spiral. You'll kind of spiral a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I
And I'm
guess
not sure if it's just male to female or if it's personality or maybe a little bit of both.
you might be right. It might be more predominant with females, but I would say
Yeah.
like um I'm not sure the demographic on that, but I would say I've experienced it for sure because I care about how people like perceive me, but I also care like I want to communicate well. I value good clear
Right.
communication. So when somebody doesn't think I communicate clearly or I didn't communicate with good body language or whatever, I'm just kind of like, you know. So this type of thinking is not necessarily saying I don't care how you receive me. That could actually be insecurity on another end, but it's just the
Yeah.
security in yourself to say, um, I don't. And this is also true with parenting. Like parents actually will mistreat their kids because they'll tell them something they don't respond like adults because they're kids, and then they will begin to treat their kids more harshly. Why? Because they're trying to control their kids, and that's just not what like they should be trying to do. They should be modeling what it looks like to be to relegate yourself, how to
Yeah.
control yourself. But it's funny, like when parents will tell their kids give instructions and they don't do it, and the parents yell at the kids. The kids just they mimic their parents' response in that way, and they yell back, and
Right.
and they're like, "Don't do that." And so you've started off this pattern of um, that you're teaching them how to communicate, and you
Hmm.
want to say, "Well, I'm an adult; I can talk this way," and it's like no, you should actually just like be consistent with your communication across the board. I don't know if that may make sense, but like what I'm trying to say is
Yeah.
when like when I talk to my kids, there's sometimes where I'm like, this may upset my kid, and it's okay for them to be sad at if I said, "Oh, it's time for us to turn off the TV," and they might get sad. I don't have to feel like I have to control their emotions, but I'm their parent
Right.
and I'm there with them, and I'll help them transition to the next thing. That's what a parent does. But when a parent feels like I have to control their emotions and I have to make them happy all the time, you have
Yeah.
stepped into something that now is going to be really overwhelming to you. Now, just for those listening in, I am not an expert in parenting, so I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. But I do,
However, he does have 3 children of his own. So,
yes. So I've definitely thought of this, and I'm really interested in just the overall child psychology and how to
yeah.
raise something I've been studying more recently too. But for
Yeah.
maybe another podcast, we could dive into that. But getting back to the subject of just breaking down overwhelm, just
Yeah.
being overwhelmed. I like this thought process. So you said control the controllables. So like, and maybe you can add to this, but this is how I would do it. Like maybe somebody's really overwhelmed. It's like, okay, take a step back, like breathe.
Yeah.
Maybe at first, it would be good for you to go get some good sleep. You can control
Yeah.
that, or to a large level. Get some good sleep. Go work out really hard. Go feed your body some good nutrition. So you see how we did that? We tied in fitness and nutrition into this bigger conversation. We're being good coaches. So you
Yeah.
do. So you go do those things. There's some controllables. And one thing, there's a quote that I really like, and I'm not even sure the author, but it's basically this: the cure for overwhelm is focus, simplify, prioritize, and take one step forward. And
Yeah. One step.
so, like,
One step.
so here's like, if you have the problem, you may not even start attacking it, but like just getting good sleep, getting a good workout, getting nutrition puts me in a good frame of mind. Like, okay,
Yeah.
like good, like I'm feeding my body well. My mental state is going to be really clear. Now let's really focus on what the one step forward. What's that one thing that if I did would make the biggest impact? I'm going to focus on that rather than focusing on fixing everything,
Yeah.
and just one little habit, and maybe that'd be the focus on that week, and then you can begin to layer that to where you establish new healthy rhythms. And what was overwhelming, you're going to be able to overcome. My wife has this funny story where every semester at college, she would look at the syllabus or whatever for a course. She would look at it
Yeah.
and she would cry every time. She's like,
Oh.
there's no way I'm going to be able to do this. I'm supposed to write this and read how many books and blah, 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 blah. She would cry every single time. But every single year she
Oh.
finished all the assignments. She crushed it. She is would fit into that category of perfectionism and wants to do the best and nail everything. And she was
Yeah.
overwhelmed. But once she got started and she just took a step forward, that the feelings of being overwhelmed did subside. And you just rack up a few wins, even if you're not where you want to be, you're going to feel great.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I love that.
So moving on, another point, I was going to say the point, but I was like, oh no, I'm throwing off the points. That's right. You want to reassess and adjust your goals. I'll just be really quick with this, but like,
Yeah.
if you had a setback, you're not going to be able to start where probably you stopped because you had a setback. So just reassess,
Right.
look at your goals, because if you started back at the workout intensity that you were at, it may be too much. If you were trying to lose weight before and you started at the caloric restriction that you were at, it may be too much. So another point that we have here is simplify your training, simplify your nutrition. If the area that you're trying to overcome is fitness, and that can be really helpful. So just reassess and say, okay, my goal isn't to do an hour workout. That's what I was doing. I'm going to try to get 3 workouts in that are 25 minutes. That's a great place to start. That's simplifying.
Yeah.
Complexity
And it might take.
kills momentum.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, complexity typically kills momentum. Simplicity actually builds it.
Yeah. No, simplicity is key. And another thing in like the reassessing and adjusting goals and vision, it might take time to reassess and adjust. And this kind of goes back to what I said before, that not everything is instantaneous. Sometimes you got to sit with it. You got to move the pieces around. You have to look at what's obtainable, figuring out like, what are you able to do right here, right now? What habits and things can you do on a daily basis to move you towards that? But sometimes it takes time to build the vision. And you got to, pivot a couple of times.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So to close this off, this episode, there's one last thing that I think could be really beneficial, is find accountability and community. Now,
Yeah.
Amber and I are coaches. We love helping people like reach their goals. We like to help people with their mental performance. We like to help people with their nutrition, their training. If there's a way that we could serve you in that way, we would love to do so. So feel free to reach out to us. But whether it's us or someone else, like it doesn't even have to be like a paid coach, a trusted friend, whoever it is. Maybe you have a group of people that you trust and that you could share things with. One of the best things that you can do, I know for me, when I'm overwhelmed, if I could talk something through, and sometimes talking something through helps me process. I'm not one of those people.
Yep.
Like, find that person and like just allow yourself to talk things through. They may ask you questions and you're able to come to clarity just by having someone you can talk to. But then you might find clarity, then you need accountability and somebody to help you stay on track to what you said you're going to do. One of the
Right.
best skills you can learn in 2025 is actually just committing to the fact, I'm going to do what I said I was going to do. And
Phew.
I just
Yeah.
talked to a client about this. When you don't say what you're going to do, one of two things needs to happen. Either you need to say, I'm lacking the discipline in doing what I was going to do. So you keep yourself accountable. Or you reset your expectations. Like sometimes
Yeah.
I'm not showing up in a certain way, and there's a good reason why I'm not showing up because like
Yeah.
it's in conflict with something else, and I set an unrealistic expectation. If I did set an unrealistic expectation, there's no use beating myself up about it. Oh, I lied to myself. I didn't show up. I said I would. Well, you overscheduled yourself.
Yeah.
Readjust. So, but you want to get to the place where either you're resetting expectations or you're confronting yourself in a healthy way to say, oh, you know what? I want to show up for myself. If I said I'm going to do it, I'm going to show up. Because if you learn to you learn to tell yourself something and you don't do it, you're setting yourself up for consistent failure. Like you're getting used to just you're like it's fine for you to say something and not do it, and that's really going to set you up for long-term failure. You just don't want to fall
Yeah.
into that cycle. So
It's a hard cycle to break if you do fall into it.
it is, and again, that ties back to the community and accountability point. If you have someone who loves you and wants you to succeed, they can help you say, hey, you said you want to do this. Is this still something you want to do? Is this realistic expectations? Okay, let's do it. How can we overcome the barriers? What can we delete from your life that's not necessary, that does not align with your values? Sometimes you need someone on the outside. I was just listening to a neuroscience psychologist that says we are very excellent. We're very skilled, all of us, at pinpointing people's bias when they have
Ooh.
like a bias about something, or
Yeah.
they're reading the information with their bias. We're very precise in pointing that out. We have that skill. We are
Yeah.
horrible at seeing it in our own life. Absolutely horrible. Even the smartest, most intelligent people, horrible at seeing it. So he was saying
Mm.
it's so important that you have people in your life that's able to call out. It basically says you're crap, and
Yeah.
able to be able to readjust. But that takes some humility. So to come full circle, hey, listen, if you're starting again, you can do this. You will be
Yeah.
overwhelmed, but do what you can control. Um, from our perspective, go get some good sleep, go work out, get some nutrition, and then focus on that one thing. If
Yeah.
you take that step, you start racking up the wins, you will feel better, and you will
Build that confidence back up.
yeah, and you'll build that confidence. And that going back to that quote that I said earlier that I was really fascinated with, courage is the power to let go of the familiar. So,
Yeah.
hey, it's okay. You may be like 2025 is a mystery to you, and that's okay. Embrace the mystery.
Yeah.
Um, you have what it takes. You can dig deep. Start with where you're at, and you're going to do great. And the last thing I want to do is I want to close with this. My wife she's a history buff, so and I love it because we have familiar like awesome conversations. So I love philosophy, psychology. I get into that kind of stuff. So she'll tell me a story in history, and I'll start to dissect it. I want to get underneath like what's the values and thought process and all this kind of stuff. And but she loves all the facts and dates and all this kind of stuff. So she's really big into history. But she read a book on Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Like so he was like this great leader. And do you know what's intimidating? Your wife reading Winston Churchill. She's like, you know what one of the greatest leaders said? You know, it's like, oh crap. Go ahead and hit me with some Winston. You know, she would like, Winston did this.
Amazing.
Winston did that. No, she didn't really do that. But I pick on her about reading Winston Churchill because I felt like every day there was like this Winston quote. But here's a quote
Amazing.
that amazing. I love it. Here's a quote that I thought was really good that Winston said. I feel like we're like high school friends. I just call him by his first name. Should I say Churchill? Anyways, he said, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And I think that really ties into what we're talking about here. If you can have the courage just to keep going and you're willing to grow, like you don't stay in a stagnant place, you're willing to grow. So you keep going and you have a growth mindset. You, my friend, will break through.
You will have that breakthrough.
If you quit,
I love that.
If you quit and you stay down, then you will hit that failing spot. But if you keep getting back up, it's the old Japanese proverb, I believe it's Japanese, falling 7 times, but the 8th time you rise up. Actually, there's a biblical scripture too in Proverbs talks about a just man falling 7 times and rising up again. But that principle is true all through ancient wisdom. Like the person that just learns to fail and get back up, they're going to be successful.
Yeah, love that.
Amber, any closing wisdom?
No, I think we should end on that because that was just too good. I can't top it.
All right. Thank you guys for just listening in. We're going to continue on several episodes here on just mindset, restarting, recalibrating. I think you guys will find it really helpful. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.